Okay, all right. So I'm very happy to welcome all of you to this public forum on Daoism, ecology, and sustainable investing. I'm David Palmer from the Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences here and from the Department of Sociology. Nowadays, sustainability and sustainable investing is a very hot topic that has attracted enormous attention from all sectors of society and is being institutionalized around the world and even in Hong Kong and mainland China through the norms of ESG, environmental, social, and governance for corporations and their investments. Here in China, everybody knows that Daoism is an important source of ecological thinking. Everybody knows about 天人合一, the oneness of humanity and heaven, or the oneness of humanity and the environment. But beyond that, maybe most people don't really know much more than that our Taoist tradition in China believes that the environment is important. And many people probably are not too sure about, is there anything in Taoism that might be helpful for advancing sustainability and sustainable investment? Well, I don't know, but I'm sure it must be. And so in order to start this conversation, we've decided to host this forum here. And we've invited the world's leading scholar on Taoism and the environment in the English-speaking world, and a panel of distinguished respondents coming from the Taoist, the academic, and the business worlds. And before I present our speaker, I would like to introduce, we have the honor of having with us today, Master Zhang Mingxin, who, as she was telling me this morning, has come down into the world of humanity, 下到人间了, from the cloudy mountain of Qingchengshan in the west of Sichuan province, which is really one place where we can truly feel the oneness of humanity and the environment. Master Zhang Mingxin is the Vice President of the China Taoist Association, 中国道教协会的副会长, the President of the Chengdu Taoist Association, 成都道教协会的会长, and the President of the Qingchengshan Taoist Association, 庆城山道教协会的会长, and of the Taoist Academy of Qingchengshan, 道教学院的庆城山道教学院的院长. So we are most delighted to have, just to beginning with a few welcoming remarks, Master Zhang Mingxin. Zhang Mingxin道长.
Nói sự thật话, cảm谢我们钟教授来参加道教的生态可持续投资。我是修行人，能够参加这个活动，我感觉的我到人间来学习人间的人的智慧，也感恩各位教授今天给予学习，祝大家幸福吉祥，福寿无量。你说了好啊？但你不翻译哦，你们从心去听，你们信不信？从心去听，我跟他们讲，都一般从心去听，算了吧。 不用翻译，不用翻译，因为这好多都会中文，只有快爸不会中文的。我来教授会中文，听了没有？因为道教我是青城山来的，生态是众生的生态，是宇宙的生态，不是哪个个人的生态，不是道教个体的生态，道是世界的，是众生的。前天我们开了个会，六大教，道它的化身，在佛教成佛成道，在天主教、基督教、伊斯兰教都是讲经布道。道教从5000年，我们中华民族探索了它，发掘了这个能量。5000年，中华民族的一个老祖宗轩辕皇帝伏羲神龙就把这个能量给我们探索出来了，不用现在的科学，也不用什么仪器，他们用他们的天人合一的那种感知感受出来的。所以今天我们钟教授提出这个生态可持续发展道教的，它不是我这儿，它是人的天人合一，人与自然结合在一起的超智慧、超能量的一座探索器，就跟这个发音切的，不低持续性，持续性也够时间。今天我们吃了午饭，晚上又饿了，持续性的晚上又吃什么来补充它？持续的智慧投资。那么我这儿到一段时间它就消失了，就过期了。那消费者他又要去寻求新的，有怎么？但是永远是用道的智慧去，道教和道的智慧去寻求人类的发展、自然的生态的需求，我们为这个环境去付出。道教济世利人，我们永远用一种态度去为世、为人去服务，把自己那个超能量的智慧启迪出来，这才是永远的生命和取不完的资源。持续嘛，持续，你那个教授就是持续。好多人听得懂我的话，50%用心去听，没有困难的。我的教授一天读书，一天读书，一天读书，那文章是永远学不完的。那么把转化为生命，转化为价值，转化为财富。这个财富的用的就是以时代需求而去。生态是每一个人，我看到的生态不是自然的生态。那青城山那个仙山，青城山是真正的仙山，真正的仙山，天人合一，人神合一。宇宙自然是一体的，你在那里没有智慧，你在这做3天，做1个星期，你完全变了。你看我才来到人间几天，皮肤都变黄了。如果我长一照你们香港来过，我可能70岁就90岁了。我在青城山70岁只到50岁，就那个自然的空气，那个生态里面，因为你没有感觉的哪里叫神仙？当你春天头的时候，当不的是有一天突然感觉，你看那个春天那个树叶发展发出来那个生态自然，就跟你们擦香水一道女娃娃自然分出来那种，你是感受不到的。那么这是它来润养身体和润养身心，润养智慧。人世间的生态是什么？我从我钟教授身上看到，人也有生态啊。你的情绪，你的宽广，你的胸怀，你的慈悲，能润养你自己的精气神。当你处理事，你又跟你的学生在周边，这个人间的生态超越自然生态。教授，听懂没有？要听四川话。这个自然生态和人间生态，到处都有生态。当把你这个把握好了，永远探索不完，永远取之不尽。这修道，我用我修道来讲你这个生态。我一天对你们这个这一行，我原来是外行嘛，我从我的心来领悟。真正我们钟教授寻求一个新的取之不完的财富，把这个大家都去探索它。道教是包罗天地，包罗天地的运转， 他能把天地都能运转，生育万物，我们人去取一点点来，它就涵盖这个生态自然运转当中。所以我讲的跟你们那个不一样，我们怎样子把智慧用给时代，用给众生，那么我们就取的在这个看不到的物质当中取到用看不到的超能量的，就是祖先人们留下的道，最后是教，教是五大教的能量，它化为他的佛教就化为菩萨，在道教就化为诸神太上老君，在自己取来就是智慧和能量的健康。在天主教更有天主教的，就是天主，它分化的，最终都是道的一体，哪个都不是哪个的，是自然界统有的。你们把用成来去写文章，写文章是不是执着巧妙的道法自然？自然就归了去，标一天有一觉抱着书看。我一般都照那些人，我写文章念了就念了。今天讲的不一样，你们今天感谢钟教授，感谢你们这个大学能够有这个人为这个课，才能有机会说这件事情，都跟我们大家分享。我也来跟大家学习，我要认真聆听来学习。你教授讲，我看他是道教，他是道教研究吗？他道教研究，我要学习。我到人间，感恩钟教授把我请到人间，又回到人间了，听到没有？我到人间来看到香港五颜六色，好多好吃的，还有说不来中文的那个我又说不来普通话，我也都好。今天感恩，保佑大家，保佑大家，欢迎每一个人到青城山来，感受自然生态超越的天地活跃的天人一体的圣山圣地。我请大家吃比你们不好吃的但好吃的东西。到青城山我管完，永远给你们当好后勤部、后勤组长，听了没有？在座的每一个人，好，无量寿佛。
好，感谢张道长的祝福。那么 so now we would like to invite, we're most delighted to have with us Professor James Miller. Okay, at the end, we'll do it at the end. Professor James Miller, who is Professor of Humanities at Duke Kunshan University and Associate Dean for Interdisciplinary Initiatives at Duke Kunshan University in Suzhou. His research focuses on the intersection of religion and ecology in China. He's published 6 books, including China's Green Religion, Daoism and the Quest for a Sustainable Future, which was published at Columbia University Press. He's noted worldwide as an expert on Daoism. His teaching interests at Duke Kunshan University include ethics and leadership, global China studies, environmental science, US studies, religious studies, and philosophy. He obtained his bachelor and MA in theological and religious studies from Cambridge University and a Ph.D. in religious and theological studies from Boston University. So, without any further ado, I would like to invite James to give his remarks.
Thank you, David. 张老师已经说了，他已经说了道教生态投资，我怎么可以补充他说的话？But maybe I can 补充 add something to what Abbot Zhang has said, because the history of Daoism and ecology and sustainable investing is actually surprisingly a history that has an international dimension to it. And I'm very sorry that Martin Palmer is not able to be with us here today, because Martin Palmer was one of the people who was instrumental in working in Daoism in China to establish ecological temples and ecological principles for the China Daoist Association. And Martin led an organization called the Alliance for Religions and Conservation, which was founded by Prince Philip in 1995, when he convened a group of leading conservation groups and religions to Windsor Castle in England. And his aim was to link what he termed the secular worlds of conservation and ecology with the faith worlds of the major religions. And 10 years prior to this, Prince Philip, who was at that time head of the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, he had organized a meeting between leaders of the world's largest religions and several environmental organizations to discuss the role that faith and religion could play in addressing ecological problems. And with funding that came from the World Bank, the Alliance for Religions and Conservation sought to bring a global environmental agenda to the world's major faith traditions, including the China Daoist Association, which was a particular interest of Martin Palmer. And the China Daoist Association developed what we can call a green agenda through various conferences, planning documents, of which particularly important was a conference held at Maoshan in 2008, which produced a document called the Maoshan Declaration. The development of a green agenda by the China Daoist Association can be seen as the fruitful engagement between a local religious tradition, one that is not widely known or understood outside of China, with a global environmental NGO and global financing from the World Bank. And one outcome, a concrete outcome of this interaction between local Chinese Daoism and global environmental agencies was the construction of a Daoist ecology temple in Shanxi near Taibaishan in the Heihe National Park. This ecology temple stands as the first practical example of what the China Daoist Association's green agenda might look like, and gave an impetus to the production of laws and guidelines and statements over the next decade. And this first Daoist ecology temple was realized in part through the work of a Dutch businessman, Allard Sticker, whose foundation played a role in financing the construction of the temple using sustainable architecture and sustainable construction techniques. And this, we can say therefore that this Chinese and UK and Dutch partnership stands as a testament to the role played by global actors and global capital in the practical development of a local response in China to environmental issues. One consequence of the input from global NGOs and global finance into environmental movement in China can be seen in a shift in language in the documents. If you read the early documents produced by the China Daoist Association, like in the 1990s about ecology, they stress Daoist concepts and Daoist values and try and look at the environment from a Daoist perspective. If you look much later, around 2005 or 2007, you will see a transformation. Instead of the Daoist language, these documents now reflect international, if you like, language about energy conservation, environmental education, or biodiversity preservation. So environmental communication in China has tended to adopt a global scientific discourse using scientific environmental principles, and has not tended to rely on traditional Chinese concepts such as feng shui, qi, all of these terminology that we have within Chinese culture to describe the relationship between human beings and the natural environment. And there's a mismatch, therefore, between environmentalism using this kind of global scientific language and the way that it is received by local people in their own local environments. And the anthropologist Emily Yeh wrote a book showing how, with the best of intentions, international NGOs coming to China to bring the language of environmental discourse to China produced some kind of miscommunication, because often they were working in areas of ecological sensitivity. These areas in China are typically places like Yunnan, Tibet, Qinghai, places where indigenous ethnic minority peoples have lived for thousands of years, developing their own local knowledge of their own landscapes, their own understandings of the environment in which they live. And the global actors coming into these local places, this produced a sort of mismatch in understandings and led, in some cases, to the failure of these kinds of environmental projects. So this raises the question of how do we bring a global issue like climate change or sustainability and realize this in a local context, such as Shan or some other place in China, where people in those areas for many years have developed their own local understandings about the place in which they live. The language, and here's the issue, there's a mismatch in worldview between the environmental discourse that is scientific in its origin and the worldview of local cultures, religions, and traditions. The language of global science is underwritten by the worldview of modernity, and modernity presents itself as a framework in which human beings possess individual agency, freedom, consciousness, and subjectivity, whereas the natural world or the environment just functions as a kind of backdrop. It's something out there upon which we human beings act and in which we build meaning. In Western environmental philosophy, we call this an anthropocentric worldview or a perspective. And this anthropocentric perspective suggests that nature is valuable insofar as it's valuable to us as human beings. Human beings are subjective, free to create our own meaning, free to exploit the resources of nature and to turn them into capital and profit. Nature, we say, is objective. It follows natural laws. It doesn't have its own purposes or meanings. It has no subjectivity, no feelings of its own. This dichotomy between humans and nature, subject and object, religion and science, we could say, these dualisms are foundational to our modern understanding of the world, and they seem to us modern people natural, just the way things are. But here's the problem. When this environmentalism as a global movement presumes that the language of science and the worldview of modernity is universal, it runs the risk of not being able to communicate with people who do not live in precisely the same worldview or who are not modern in quite the same way. So the importance of the intersection of Daoism, ecology, investment, and finance is to think through this issue of how do we translate these global concepts, these global worldviews into the local context. And I look forward to hearing the responses from the other participants as well about this issue of translating something global into something local. So what I would like to do today, briefly, is to think about Daoism as proposing an alternative worldview to that of modernity, and a worldview that I think is more suited to the era of ecological civilization. And I'd just like to stop for a moment to think about this term, ecological civilization, because what it does at the very least is to suggest that what we are living through is a transition, not simply the invention of new technology or this kind of thing, but we're living through a transition to a new form of civilization, a new form of living in the world. And this is not going to, this transition to a sustainable way of living isn't going to entail the continuation of the status quo. And we're not going to be successful just by tweaking a few things here and there. Rather, the transition to a sustainable economy, a sustainable finance, a sustainable way of living in the earth will be more fundamental in nature, entailing shifts in economics and in our culture as well. And I think that Daoism can stand as an alternative worldview, an alternative to the worldview of modernity as we have inherited it from the West, and something that is more suitable to the era of an ecological civilization. So, as I've mentioned, one of the main achievements of modernity has been to objectify nature. That's to say, to make it something capable of being manipulated by technology and transformed into something of value. And we think that nature on its own doesn't have any agency or freedom, it's just stuff out there. But in the more recent scientific developments that have happened in the 20th century, we've begun to build up a slightly different picture of nature and its relationship to human beings. The science of evolution shows how human beings emerge in a broader context of the evolution of life on Earth, which goes back 4.7 billion years. And we can even extend this into a story about the evolution of the entire universe, which goes back some 13 billion years. We now understand human life as taking place in this enormous historic backdrop and context. And without that, human beings would not exist at all. The science of environmental studies or environmental science, what this teaches us is how we human beings influence and impact the world around us, the environment, and also how the environment impacts us. Maybe we assume that's a kind of normal way of thinking today. We can understand, oh, there are some diseases in the world outside. This can enter our bodies and impact us in some way. But for a long time, it was very difficult to imagine this as the way in which the world worked. People in the past did not care, for instance, about polluting the land. They thought, oh, it's just something out there. It has nothing to do with us. But because of environmental science, we now know the precise ways in which we affect the environment outside us, and it has some impact on our health and well-being. And the third scientific revolution, if you like, is that of ecology, which thinks about species and biology not as individual species, but as relations between species and their environments. And from all of these developments, now we begin to understand the relationship between human beings and the world as a kind of interconnected system. And this, and we can, scholars have termed this a kind of science 2.0. And in this modern science 2.0, we've moved from a kind of simplistic mechanical model of nature to a more complex understanding of human life woven into the fabric of planetary life, operating not only by cause and effect, but by systems processes like feedback loops, emergence, organic changes. And this more modern or more contemporary scientific understanding of the relationship between human beings and nature is an understanding that we can term one of integrated dependencies, right? So we are integrated with the world around us, and we depend on the world around us, and vice versa as well. So we're thinking about the world now, not as stuff out there, but as relational dependencies. We depend on the planet to provide us with air and water and all of these things, and also the planet depends upon us. This relational, dependent worldview is very close to ideas contained within Taoist philosophy and religion, right? The Tao Te Ching specifies these relationships in different ways, but we can say things like Dao Sheng Yi, Yi Sheng Er, Er Sheng San, San Sheng Wan Wu. What is this Sheng, right? It's a relationship of dependency. Without Dao, there is not one. Without one, there isn't two. Without two, there isn't three. And we can see, what do we have in the world around us? We have a network of dependencies. Or if we think about Ren Fa Di, Di Fa Tian, Tian Fa Dao, Tian Fa Ziran, right? Or Dao Fa Ziran, right? What is this Fa, right? In English, we usually translate it as model, right? So the earth becomes a model for something, or the heavens become a model. Again, it indicates a kind of dependent relationship. And when we look at the world around us from the Taoist perspective, we don't see nature outside of us, outside as little bits of atoms or objects. We see something that is a pattern or a relationship for us as human beings. We depend on the earth around us. The earth around us depends on us as well. And we're woven into an evolving fabric of relationship. This, for me, is the fundamental insight of Taoist philosophy and religion with regard to the natural world. Nature is not stuff, it's relationships for us as human beings. So Daoism proposes what I would call a kind of reversal of the way that modern human beings think about the world. In modernity, we think about subjectivity within human beings. We think about nature as stuff out there. But if we somehow realize that our human subjectivity, our consciousness, our freedom, our agency depends on, is modeled on, Sheng Yu comes from, or if Fa is modeled on what we have in the earth around us, we realize that we are who we are, not because we're different from nature, right? But because we emerge from nature, right? So this is a fundamental shift in our way of thinking about where we human beings are in the world. Another way to think about this is the question of place. Where is nature? Where is the environment? In modern way of thinking from the West, we think, oh, it's that stuff out there, right? It's that stuff out there. Where is it? It's out there. But when Taoists imagine nature, they think about nature as a potentiality or a source of power or something that can be entered within the body. And nature is something to be experienced in our own bodies. And we know this from the Taoist cultivation practices. We know this, Taoists have very strongly emphasized the cultivation of qi in the body. This is an experience of the power of nature within the body. And this way of thinking leads me to a kind of insight, which is that the environment is not just something out there. It's not an environment. As I tell my students, it's an environment, right? It's something inside of us as well. Our own lives, our health, our well-being is bound up with that which is outside of us. I studied the Shangqing Taoist scriptures. One of the things that you read in the Shangqing scriptures are a kind of visualization meditations, where you visualize the heavens, the stars, the gods in the night sky coming down and entering into the body. This is a kind of meditation that makes you realize that your body is constellated, is shaped by the forces of the cosmos. And because the forces of the cosmos have entered into your body, you have life, you have vitality, you have the capacity to live. It's a dependency, right? It's a relationship, and it's a dependency, and it's an integration. These powers of the cosmos are integrated within the human body, and they give us life, right? And what is this life? In Chinese, we think about life as qi. What is the basic characteristic of qi? It flows, right? It moves. Qi is not a thing. It's not a substance. It's a flow. It's a liquid. It's something that flows within our bodies, that enters into our bodies from outside and goes back into the world outside. So when we think about what we are as bodies, normally we think about our bodies as, oh, I'm this thing here, and I have this skin, and there's what's inside me, and there's what's outside me. But when we realize that our body is a process of qi flowing from the world into our bodies, through our bodies and out, we realize that our bodies are a kind of liquid, right? We're a kind of liquid, we're not a fixed or solid thing. We're a kind of liquid entity. And so long as this liquid, this qi is flowing, then we have life. And when it doesn't flow anymore, then our life stops. So what is the question of sustainability then? The question of sustainability is, I don't want you to think about it as, oh, this is the world, let us keep it like it is, right? This is like preserving something, right? I want to think about sustainability in a different way, using the Chinese concept of fanrong, flourishing, right? When we look at the natural world, we see nature flourishing. This means that the relationships between things in the world are active. There is flow, there is movement. And when we think about we want the world to be sustainable, it means we want it to be flourishing. And this doesn't mean holding on to something from the past and keeping it there forever. It means embracing the future, allowing the flourishing of things to create new futures and new worlds and new worlds for us. So I've talked largely in abstract terms. My students tell me, you know, in China, the word abstract, 抽象, right? Now it sort of means like weird or like very surreal or random, right? Too difficult to understand. And I don't want you to think that Taoism is an abstract philosophy. Far from it. The Taoist experience is not one created by philosophers sitting in armchairs. It's created by people living in Qingchengshan or other places, having the experience of a Tao in their bodies and in the world. And it's this concrete experience that has produced all of the wealth of thinking and the experience of relationship between our bodies and the world. And from this sense, we can think of Taoism as a proudly local tradition, right? So when you go to different parts of China, you go to a different mountain, you understand the practices of one place, it's maybe slightly different than something that happens on another mountain or in another place. Each place has its own particular way of doing Taoist cultivation, particular to the experience of that particular place. At the same time, Taoism proposes some kind of, so I want to emphasize this, a kind of localness of Taoism. And I think from this, it's impossible to imagine Taoism without China, right? And it's also impossible to imagine China without Taoism, right? So there's something very, very particular about this. But at the same time, I think Taoism offers ideas that are universal in application, right? Taoism, I think, is not just for Taoists, it's for everybody as well. And I think that this worldview of the human body in relation to the world as not as an environment, but something that lives within us, is a gift of Daoism to the world in an era of ecological civilization and sustainability. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, James. And the original plan for this forum was to be a dialogue between James Miller and Martin Palmer, no relation to myself. Unfortunately, Martin who was based in the UK, had an accident just last week. Nothing too serious, but unfortunately he was hospitalized and unable to take part in today's event. James actually introduced Martin, and we will have Martin's views represented by Fan Zhui. Fan Zhui has worked very closely with Martin Palmer. So Martin Palmer was the founder of the the World Alliance of Faiths and Conservation, working together with Prince Philip in the 1990s and the early 2000s to bring all the religious communities of the world together to work together for environmental sustainability. And recently, Martin established the Faith Invest Alliance and the Media and Arts Alliance of the Green Climate Fund of the UN, working to bring the religious communities of the world to be more proactive in developing sustainable investment principles to invest their own, all the assets that are owned by religious institutions and religious individuals. Zhui has worked closely with Martin Palmer as a representative of the World Taoist Federation, trying to continue the engagements that had begun that James described of the China Taoist Association for building environmental and ecological temples and environmental protection of Taoist sites in China. So now the next stage is how to really use Taoist principles to develop sustainable investment principles, and also how to bring Taoist voices into global dialogues and global discourses on environmental sustainability. So Fan Zhui has deep expertise at the intersection between finance, environmental science, and Taoist principles. She's held leadership roles in Beijing and Hong Kong's public and private sectors, leading vital financial initiatives and fostering strategic alliances. Zhui was instrumental in strategic capital planning at a major Chinese investment bank and developed a risk management team at China's largest state-owned financial media group, playing a key role in M&A and IPO processes. She provided ESG and climate change-related solutions to Chinese state-owned companies listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange while working at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Beijing. Zhui currently holds a senior advisory position for the World Taoism Federation and is building relationships for the World Taoist Federation with UN-related organizations such as the Green Climate Fund, the United Nations Environmental Program, and the United Nations Development Program. She's also researching the application of Taoist principles to climate investment and ESG. Zhui obtained her bachelor's degree in mathematics at Bristol, a master's in environmental technology at Imperial College London, and 3 significant financial certifications in mainland China. She has just completed her MPhil on the anthropology of Daoism under my supervision, and with James as the external examiner on the anthropology of Taoism and the environment. And is a lead author of an original work on green finance and Chinese ESG along the Belt and Road, which will be included in the SAGE Handbook and on the Chinese environment. So in lieu of Martin Palmer, we will have Ms. Fan Zhui. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And it's my privilege here to share some of the practice that Martin Palmer and we had with green within the the World Health Federation and also with some of the UN works that we currently, based on what Professor James Miller is talking about, the world need a more, Taoist insights. How about environment? So I'm going to quickly share with that some of the practical work we have done, because since Marty and Palmer, we have been worked together for several years. Cool. So in the middle, that's Marty and I. We're in a Taoist role, but this is what's happening at the first General Assembly of the World Health Federation at the ancestor place of Laozi. So, and we have been given the privilege to be the consultant for the World Health Federation. Okay. So, some of the work that Martin and I were trying to promote in the UN works is about the UN United Nations environmental work. And also, most important one is a Green Climate Fund. So Green Climate Fund is one of the most important part of the UN work about the United Nations framework of Convention on Climate Change. And this is some of the work that Martin in the middle that we're together. So we have presented some of the Taoist fans to the Green Climate Fund founder, Mismo founder, but the work actually we try, I'm going to share with you some of the thoughts that how Martin tell me, say within 1 minute, you need to tell, GCF about the green climate, how to talking with a UN body who is doing the green work, investment work, but how Taoism could make some contribution to that. This is some of the work we have done. So, and I want to, based on what Professor James Miller shared with that. So I think there is something is about first. So Taoism can provide some alternative cosmological explanation about climate change. Global climate change is based on the disorder of the qi, the disbalance of yin and yang. And also Taoism can beyond the separation between the nature and culture, as Professor James Miller just mentioned about it. So like Taoism, the Taoist way seeing the nature is not just as a material, but not also seeing the nature as too high that you cannot communicate it. But Taoism says that the nature is something we can cooperate with. Like I'm going to show you quickly about a case of a Du Jiangyan case in Mount Qingchen, how the Asian Taoists understand the nature and actually create this 2,000-year very sustainable infrastructure project, water management, but also engage with the religion and local community. I'm going to give a case about that later. And from there, how we can think to inspire to think our overseas investment to another country. So what kind of ESG principle we can learn from that. And then the third one, actually, Professor James Miller already mentioned about the qi flow between the nature and the humanities. And of course, there's beyond the nature and the culture. So, and also the next one is about the, okay, I'm going to share here. So this is Mount Qingchen, Qingchen Shan. But there is a 2,000-year-old irrigation system. I also show two pictures here by some young Taoists. So there's one way saying, so the transcript here was the two photos here is the drawing by some local Taoist children that their understanding of the global climate change. But the inspiration was coming from a text about Asian master from Mount Qingchen. 二王庙的当家王乃通 in Qing Dynasty, that particularly he mentioned how Taoists seeing this 2,000 years old irrigation system, how that works, how to manage the water within the region in 2,000 years, but that can be sustained. So he actually mentioned in the text, 天时地利验物说, saying that there's to think about managing infrastructure projects, you also need to think about cosmological reason. Why the technology developed, why we need infrastructure, and what is the development of the technology and infrastructure work, how that relationship with the Tao. So what is the relationship between the heaven and what is the relationship between us and also the relationship between the humanity. So in his text, I quote some of the ideas saying that he actually provided us a worldview, a cosmological view, explaining that if the chi of the heaven and chi of the earth and chi of the water and chi of the humanities all in balance, then everything is in balance. But if that explained, 天气不和，汉剑青阴，地气不和，地动山摇，人气不和，使痛生。So 水气不和则泛滥。So actually explained another case. What if the chi of the heaven is not in harmony? What if the chi of the earth is not harmony? What if the chi of humanity is not in harmony? And what if the chi of water is not in harmony? So that's another photo we're presenting here. Okay, this is by some local Taoist children drawing the picture, saying this is the idea that how the global climate change works. But in the middle, that's everything in the circle. The chi from the bottom of the earth actually going down, and the chi from the heaven is going, the chi from the earth is going up to the heaven, and the chi from the heaven is going down to the earth, and humanity is in the middle, and very important for this transformation. So that is a kind of illustration of this Asian textbook from Mang Qingchen, mentioning that this is a very harmonic way, that the 天地人气 is all in harmony, but this is something not in harmony. That is something about the global climate change. So I'm going to quickly show some of the old pictures. Okay, so now we have seen what Asian Taoists, they understand this irrigation system for 2,000 years. But what are these pictures? So these pictures actually is like why keeps an infrastructure project can lasting for 2,000 years. It's by people, managed by people. How? Because in winter solstice, the Dujiang irrigation system managing the water from cosmological principles, from astronomy, from Chinese traditional Canada. So there are two important critical points from the season. One season is from winter solstice. So the local communities, and they are actually together to manage the water. So you see, this is local communities. This picture was taken in 1970s. So this is a irrigation system, but actually need to be maintained by people. To dig the mud, clean the mud in the winter, so that in the springtime, so the water can flow. So I have actually summarized a few principles, I think, to develop that. So, for example, one case is about the BRI overseas investment, where our SOEs, state-owned enterprises, when they go out to another nature, for example, what they can then learn from our Mang Qingchen's case, from Taoism case manager Du Jiangyan. I think one thing is adapting to the local culture. For example, we're going to another culture for like Dujiang irrigation system. The founder Li Bing was from another kingdom, actually come to Mang Qingchen and then create this 2,000-year-old system. So there's a lot of things you need to learn from local people and to engage with local people. But then there's also the chi communication between the environment and the culture. So when you are the people from another culture, when you bring your culture to the new environment, and what is a local community's chi? And then if you can communicate with the local community, and then there is you can beyond the barrier between the nature and the culture in the way. And also because the Taoism also have this idea of the total capacity development. What is the limitation for that? That you be to consider. And also as we understand that the picture I shown before, to manage an infrastructure project, you also need to think about what are the ethics for technology development. Like Taoist that I showed the text, that when he observed the irrigation system, he would think about, okay, why we invent a technology? What is the relationship between the heaven and the Tao? So I think these are the 4 principles I can think based on Professor James Miller's talk. And then there's something about how for SOEs, they're going out to another project to doing infrastructure and how to better to engage with local communities so that they can learning from the Dujiangyan irrigation system. So it is not just a hard material irrigation system, but involves community, involves religions, involves the festivals. Those are many stakeholders you can think of and to be engaged. Yeah, that is my kind of sharing. Thank you.
Oh. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so thank you so much, Zue. So what was interesting here is that James had mentioned that the environment is not just something physical out there. And now Zue talked about that actually the Taoist environment principles involve engaging deeply with local community. So we move from, so we talked about environment E to social S. And our next speaker is an expert on ESG, environment, social, and governance principles for investment. So our next speaker is Anthony Jung, who is the managing director of ESG for Polymer Capital and board governor and green finance convener of Friends of the Earth Hong Kong. Anthony specializes in green and sustainable investment, SDG investing, and climate governance in Asia. Prior to joining Polymer Capital, he served in renowned asset managers in London, Singapore, and Hong Kong, including Gartmore, Pictet, BNP Paribas, and Exodus Point Capital. Anthony was the first in Asia who attained the Certified ESG Analyst designation and was awarded Regional ESG Leader Award by Insights and Mandate. He's one of the leading proponents of ESG in Hong Kong, and the success of his work can be seen in that now ESG is becoming part of the regulations for IPO in Hong Kong. He's held various industry positions, including Stakeholder Council, member of the Global Reporting Initiatives, and member of the SRI Professional Assessment Panel at the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investment. So thank you. Please join us for your remarks, Anthony.
So a very good afternoon, everyone, joining this great, platforms that we have got visitors from all over the world to share about the importance of Daoism, ecology, and sustainable investing. I myself specialize on ESG investing for years, and I would like to share with you, a bit of my journey myself. So as an investment analyst, as Professor Palmer previously mentioned, that I specialized, I was working in London. A lot of financial institutions or fund managers started off sustainable investing in a way of value alignment. So what you can see here is that some of the examples that asset managers look at sustainable investing many years ago. So either they are assign certain values which they think that these kind of activities will not be sustainable in the long run, or to do it in a way that is really like generally accepted principles, global norms. A lot of them would be based on principles, declarations, or agreements agreed by UN or other international bodies. So these are just some of the examples that they start with in terms of sustainable investing. This is a very simple table, by CFA Institute and also by the FAS program that have basically bucketed different types of funds, some of them with different faith origin, the ways that they would restrict or they call it exclude. Now, I think by listening to what Martin and expert has shared earlier, right? I think all of us here would have a questions to start with, right? So how does all this restrictions or exclusion really help us in dealing with the problem of ecology or climate change? A bit of a ways of they look at how they do that to start with. So on the left-hand side is exactly some of the exclusions that we have heard about. The purpose of doing that obviously is about alignment of values. So they've got different sets of principles or moral values which they think they would need to scoping, portfolio investment and putting on restrictions on it. The concepts actually linked very well with so-called the fiduciary duties of trustees or asset managers. So when fund managers manage money for asset owners or every one of you, maybe in your pensions, they are trying to generate investment return, but at the same time, they would be taking good care of your money so that your money would be invested in not so sustainable or ethical ways. So that's the fiduciary concepts that's born with it. That doesn't answer, the full questions that we needed in addressing the global sustainability problem. So what you'll be seeing is that there's an evolution from part 1 alignment to now 2 and 3, focus on more like ESG integration. So while you try to, it's like the best of both worlds, right? We try to generate investment returns at the same time trying to address sustainability problem together. We call it ESG integration. Or to the third one, where impact and ESG come first and returns come second. And I think that is what the industry trying to respond to the pressing sustainability issues. Now, one of the additional thing that the whole world is also contemplating is to how to address the pressing climate issues. And maybe some of you would come across with the jargon COP29. It's the UN Climate Change Conference. This year was in Azerbaijan. Anyone's been there? No. Oh, we've got some very interesting, participants here as well. So I have got the luxury to be a part of the Chinese delegate to COP29 and was learning a lot from there. So one of the things that I would like to share with you is that in addressing climate change, obviously, greenhouse gas emissions, all the biodiversity impacts has been widely discussed. But if you look at some of the pictures that I would like to share here, right, you would actually see that there's a very wide range of stakeholders that's also playing a role there. From the health perspectives, for example, WHO has actually rolled out papers that, some of these our air quality issues has been increasing medical costs significantly to the public system for certain countries and has been advocating for some reforms on that front. Just Transition on the top right-hand corner, talking about the importance of a just and fair transition to a lower carbon economy. So how, to address the differences in economic developments of different countries, specifically to some of the BRI countries and economy, emerging markets. And on the top left-hand side, I would like to share with you a very interesting part across all the country pavilions, the faith pavilions, which I spent quite a bit of time with. So this is exactly what the bottom left hand side is one of the events that have attended at the faith pavilion at COP29 this year. Is a combination of all different faiths, obviously including Daoism, and have world leaders looking at, what are needed. So I'm sharing with you some of the key topics that has been discussed in the faith pavilion this year at COP29, from our important, dialogue to faith-based solutions, to climate justice, which is a very closely linked to climate transition, and also to make use of indigenous and local wisdom in addressing some of the nature issues. And finally, they're also responding to the global agenda of SDG, Sustainable Development Goal. So actually a very good discussions indeed. And also, I would like to share with you some of the key messages from the Faith Pavilion at COP29. You could see that there is that's beyond a plan and discussion, and there's a call for action, and there's a very important elements in inclusion, in supporting vulnerable communities. So to respond to all the precious, messages and knowledge that I've learned, I would like to share with you, a little souvenir that I got from the Faith Pavilion at COP29, a message from Mr. Ismail Surajaldin, a very learned educator, and in fact, he was the vice president for environmental sustainability at World Bank, the very first role that was created at the very first COP at Rio Janeiro in 1992. So here, Ismail shared that, there are 4 key points that I would like to re-emphasize. These are, first, number 1, the reality of climate change and the need to treat it as the ecological existential risk that it is. Number 2, that in addition to the dramatically reducing emission, we must also promote adaptation and resilience to protect the lives and livelihood of the vulnerable poor. 3, that we must remember the gender dimensions in all we do, and truly appreciate the role of women in development. And number 4, that we must transform the food and agriculture sector for being part of the emissions, the problem of the emissions, to being part of the solution via we increase efficiency, reducing waste, and promotes outreach to reduce poverty and hunger around the world, and to ensure food security for all. And all that will be possible everywhere in all landscape where we adopt science-based policies, regulations, and evidence-based investment to lead us into adaptations of innovations, technology, the embracing of recycling and circular economy as a dominant paradigm. So thank you, and I'll stop here.
So thank you so much, Anthony, who has demonstrated the spaces exist and are becoming more important for the views of the different faith communities of the world to become part of the process of fighting against or engaging with climate change and developing, joining into the processes of the Sustainable Development Goals, ESG, and all of these other different frameworks. The need, the welcome and the need for voices such as the voice of Daoism. So to further elaborate on some Taoist principles, our next speaker is Li Haibo, who also comes from Chengdu. And Master Li Haibo is a scholar of Taoist philosophy, inherited from the Yellow Emperor and Laozi, so from the Huanglao Pai. He's a renowned expert consultant of cultural strategy and the founder of Daoshang, Taoist Business and Entrepreneurship as a knowledge system. He's currently the director of the Sichuan Chinese Cultural Wisdom Research Institute and the Chengdu Daoshang Business and Technology Research Institute. Li Haibo's major research areas include the Taoist philosophy inherited from the Yellow Emperor and Laozi, social governance strategies based on Taoist philosophy, Daoshang in economic development, corporate management and leadership, rethinking the Caishen, the god of wealth, and graphic expressions of Taoist thinking patterns. His major contributions include the construction of Daoshang as a knowledge system, as well as continuous studies on Taoist philosophy. He's written many books, including Shi, i.e. tendencies, Daoshang Zhihui, the wisdom of Taoist business and entrepreneurship, Daoshang Fanli, which is a study of Fanli, who is a Taoist saint of business, and Daoshang Xue, studies of Taoist business and entrepreneurship. So I'd like to invite Master Li Haibo to give his presentation.
谢谢钟教授，今天非常荣幸能够来听苗建时教授关于 这个生态可持续投资的一些讨论，我也很愿意把我所思考的关于道家、道商，还有当年就是2500年前财神范蠡他对可持续投资的一些成就来跟大家做一个交流。首先我自己呢，我是研究这个道商文化，我用了15年的时间把道商从一个新的名词一个新的概念，然后再逐步发展成一套新的学科体系。虽然这个目前还没有太大的影响，但是我们一直在关于道家文化还有这个道家的商业伦理，包括这个道家的经营之学，我们一直在进行相关的这个探索。对于道商这个定义，在我的书里边，我对它定义的是偏向于道家文化更广义的这个道的哲学理念，它是秉承道的思想与精神，运用道的规律力量去经商创业，实现人生大成的智慧商人。那么道它的这个精神与思想，比如我们要尊道贵德我们这个上善若水然后规律力量呢，比如苗建时教授讲的道生一，一生二，二生三，三生万物，还有我们道德经里面讲的有无相生，还有道德经里面说的道生之，德畜之，物行之，事成之，包括反者道之动，弱者道之用种种它都是对道这种规律性的一种发现跟提取。那么我们还要实现一个人生大成的智慧商人。什么是人生大成呢？我们就提了一个五财这个图，就像我们右边这个图，我们认为我们要成为一个道商，要实现可持续的这个投资与发展，我们不能仅仅拥有物质财富，这远远是不对的。或者说为了物质财富，我们可能会破坏很多，包括对我们身体对健康的一些破坏。所以我们第一个要拥有的要重视的财富是健康，这就是生财。第二个，我们要构建我们的这个影响力，我们要学会交流学会这个讲好我们的这个故事，所以口才也是非常重要的。那么第三个财就是德财，我们的道德，我们给社会做的公益事业，我们的福第四个财是我们传统意义上的物质财富，就叫钱财。第五个财呢，我们的智慧，我们的这个创新创意，它也是一种财富。所以我们的这个思想，它也是无价的财富。所以在这个体系里边，一个人一个道商拥有了生财、口财、德财、钱财、智财，我们说他才是一个实现人生大成的智慧商人。那么道商呢，它关于这个定义里边还有两方面的，一方面是关于学科体系的，道商它是一门知识一套学问。第二个呢，我们现在社会上也有不少的商人，我们说自己是按照这个道家的精神理念，或者我们有道教的这个宗教信仰，那我们这一类的商人群体，它也叫道商。所以在道商里边呢，我们有8大体系，这个左边那个图，以后有空呢，我们可以多交流。那说到道商，在中国历史上有没有谁是道商的代表人物？那我们就要介绍一位2500年前的一位非常有成就的人，他的名字叫范蠡，他还有一个名字，他化名为陶朱公。但我们很多商人都知道，他是我们的这个商人的圣人，叫商圣，也是我们心目当中非常仰慕的财神。他有什么成就呢？他自己是从小就出生在非常贫穷的人家是一个农村的孩子。但是后来他发现在中国东南版图上，也就是吴国跟越国这片地方，有可以让人成功的这个气，这种 气这种能量，所以他就跟文种就去寻觅霸造之气，怎么让一个国家能够实现强大的这种气。后来他就参与到越国的这个建设当中去，用了短短20年的时间，把越国从一个战败国扶持成为春秋5霸的最后一霸。所以他成功了之后呢，他并没有留恋他的这个成功，他反而是在事业成功了之后，他选择了一个不被大家所看好的，他去经商去了。因为在中国古代，商业的地位非常低，是几乎没什么地位的。他又用了19年的时间，在经商当中3次成为巨富然后又3次把自己的钱财全部捐献给社会。今天我们来探讨可持续投资，我觉得范蠡的身上就完全就体现了这种可持续投资。因为他有一句名言，他说的非常好，他说我不求财而财自来，我没有追求财富，是财富在追逐着我。那么他说这个我当官，我从政已经是这个国家的这个相国，相当于这个首相。我经商又3次成为巨富，人间的富贵我已经享受到极点，所以他就不断的把自己钱财捐献出去。我觉得范蠡这种理念跟刚刚我们那个分享的 ESG 这种对社会责任的这个理念也是完全一致的。范蠡他是道家学派一位非常重要的人物，但是很多人没有重视或者没有注意到他。范蠡的师傅叫文子，也是道教的4大真人里边的通玄真人，而文子的老师就是写《道德经》的作者，就是老子。所以范蠡他算老子道学的第3代正宗传人。而在范蠡的手上，他不仅仅创立了中国古代的商学体系，古代叫陶朱学他还用他的这个道家思想对黄老道学的体系构建也起到引领性的作用。所以现在有很多学者在探讨黄老学派，就认为范蠡的思想是对黄老学派有一个奠基人的这么一个身份。但范蠡他的投资策略里边呢，我们分常规的，还有一种那个看不见的投资策略。常规的，比如他通过观测天时，让自己的投资符合于宇宙自然的节律去行动，这在古代叫知斗则修备。第二个呢，他通过不断的辗转于世界各国去发现商机跟货物所以他周游列国来经商。第3个，他的投资理念呢不要盲从和跟随，应该保持自己独立的认知。所以他的经商理念有一个叫贱取如珠玉贵出如粪土。这在今天比如我们的股票投资在很多地方都用得到。但他还用钱财去帮助暂时处于低谷的人像水一样的流动叫什么呢？使财帛如流水，水往哪里去呢？水往低处去，低处就是我们人群当中最需要帮助的群体。所以范蠡他就不断的做慈善。但范蠡他也发展创新产业，他在这个产业里保持绝对的领先优势。所以我们今天所知道的琉璃这个产品其实就是范蠡发明的。那么他还追求一些完美的品质，永远是第一选择。还通过不断的传播陶朱商术来教育和带动行业整体性的发展，来培养更多的参与者与追随者，最后来让大家共同参与这项商业的事业，来进行可持续的发展。那么还有一点不为人所知的这个范蠡投资的智慧，比如在《史记》里边记载，以此为天下之中，交易有无自路通，为生可以致富。那很多人理解为这是地域性质的这个天下之中，但在我们看来呢，这个天下之中其实是阴阳2气在不断的这个转化当中它的一个焦点，所以我们得到了这种综合之气，我们的发展就可以源源不断的发展。所以中国有一个词语叫和气生财 这个和气就是介于阳气跟阴气之间一种调和的这个状态。当然，黄道学派在道商里边呢，它还有很多投资的总结，比如黄道学派强调生国统构，通过投资来实现自己，永远是第一要义，因为我们的身体要跟宇宙进行一种交融。第二种，在阴阳虚实的动态转化当中，来找到投资的切入时机，发现不被他人识别的机会。第三，在发展与保护的动态平衡当中，制定最具生态价值的投资策略，来找到这种综合之气。那么，因为根据道教的这个宇宙生存论认为，我们万物皆由气化，无论是宇宙星体，还是全球社会的这个治理，包括生命能量的这个健康，都源于我们自身对气的控制与管理。所以呢，全球气候变化的根本原因在于自然之气的失序与错乱。我们可以通过对传统道家治气的理论，还有治区的设置，将失去的气通过一定的治理法则与修复手段，使之趋于有序化运动。那么在这样的状态下，当自然之气趋于有序化和谐的时候，我们人体就能得到健康，我们社会也就能得到生态性的发展，那我们的财富呢，也就能得到一种可持续的这个成就。所以苗建时教授在他的这个文章里面谈到一种道教它是一种这个浪漫美学，就是范蠡是一个最具有浪漫美学的人。我看这个对联是北京的一个地方，叫天地庄周马，江湖范蠡船。范蠡他在经商过程当中，他陪同这个美女西施，然后一边享受人生，一边从事商业的经营所以这是江湖范蠡船他的人生可以概括为一叶扁舟上的财富之旅，这是典型的浪漫的道家艺术美学人生。那范蠡他在经商当中不断追逐水的这种智慧，来追寻自然之水的投资策略。所以中国古代还有句话叫生意兴隆通四海，财源茂盛达三江。那四海三江也都是跟水有关的。所以关于范蠡的故事呢，我们以后可以通过我的一些书来了解。那么我觉得呢，我们今天探讨的对于这个生态可持续的这个发展，对于这个水的这个理解，所以其实回归到根本上来，水也就是气，气也是水。我们可以通过这个对道家治气的理论，来对全球气候变化、对可持续投资、对生态环保的合理布局，甚至对全球经济策略的一些平衡价值，都能起到一些很好的这个解决思路在此谢谢大家。
Oh, thank you so much, Master Liu Haibo. So we've heard many different perspectives, both conceptual from Daoism, from practical experiences in ancient history and in the present, from UN and international frameworks and dialogues. So let's bring all the speakers, let's invite all the speakers to come to the front and engage. We have about 20 minutes that we can have some discussion, some Q&A. I'm sure there are many elements that we still have some questions after hearing all of the different talks. So may I invite our speakers to come to the front, please.